Hi everyone, my name is Nora Lenz, and about 15 years ago I developed a way of feeding dogs that I call rotational monofeeding that keeps dogs well for life. Um, and I have a website called rotationalmonofeeding.com and a large Facebook group, and we also have a private subscription community. Um, and frequently I Google around and see what's happening with the vets and the information that they're disseminating to their clients about nutrition. And I did that recently. I just Googled how much, because everybody, it's very common knowledge that vets don't get very much nutrition information in their training. And I wanted to make sure that that was still true because I'm still telling people that. And so I Googled it recently, and up came a video between a veterinary neurologist named Dr. Cellini and a board certified veterinary nutritionist named Dr. Bullen. It's a 52-minute video. I will post a link to it below if you want to watch the whole thing. But we have selected clips of it where really harmful information is being given out, is being discussed between these two vets, that is keeping people feeding kibble and other harmful foods to their dogs that just creates chronic disease. So I was really appalled actually by the information that was being shared. It's so obviously industry-based propaganda, has nothing to do with real life. So that's why I wanted to make my own video to sort of criticize and analyze the information that was being shared there and explain to people what's wrong with that information, because it is couched in very scientific terms. It's made to seem very rigorous and scientific, but it's absolutely not scientific because it doesn't work. It doesn't work to keep dogs healthy. What works to keep dogs healthy is to feed them properly. So anyway, my co-host in the video is Lauren Whiteman. She's a co-moderator on my Facebook group. I will post links in the description box to the Facebook group, the website, and all the information that all the resources that you could need to do some further investigation of rotational monofeeding if you'd like to do that. Lauren and I have absolutely nothing against these two people. Neither one of us know them. Just came across their video, and I've nothing but respect for all the schooling that they've gotten and the dedication to animals that they have. They obviously care about their own animals. It's just the information is incorrect, and people need to have the correct information, and that's what this video that we're making now is all about. So you will see clips of their video, and you will hear and see Lauren and I making comments about the video. So I hope you enjoy the video, and thanks for watching.
Just as a brief introduction, this is Dr. James Cellini. He's a board-certified veterinary neurologist. He hosts a veterinary show on YouTube. And here in this video, he is he's interviewing Dr. Lindsay Bullen, who's a veterinary nutritionist, on the subject of what to feed your pet. So we're going to go ahead and start a little ways into the video just to shorten the clip a little bit, because they go on for quite a while on introductions. So let's get started.
So do you think that you could have done, like if you went the general practice route, do you think you could have provided the same service to people, or you would have just had like less formal knowledge about what you were doing?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. I hope that I would have taken the initiative to get extra training so I could provide this level of service.
Right.
I honestly don't know if I would have with all of the, really important things that general practitioners have to do on a daily basis.
Right.
And so it's one of those things, like my internship really helped hone those nutrition skills. And I think I would have been a much better, or at least better qualified, nutritionally speaking, general practitioner had I gone straight out from there. But even with the benefit of a board certified nutritionist in vet school, I was sorely prepared to go out and provide accurate nutrition recommendations, better
Right.
prepared than others, don't get me wrong.
Right.
But the information that we get in, a single elective class or even a single semester, really there's a lot more information out there
Right.
regarding nutrition that really we need to be bringing to our veterinary students, and even to our continuing education opportunities.
Right. Yeah. I remember in school, the very first semester, we spent probably the most time doing gross anatomy and histopath.
Oh
Right.
my God, exactly.
So we spent
Both
an
of the classes I didn't
entire,
excel at.
yeah, like 3 to 4 month period doing that. And you could argue nutrition, just like every other major discipline, is just as important as that. And I
Exactly.
got, I think, 2 weeks or 3 weeks,
Right.
something along those lines.
And when you think about it, both the American Animal Hospital Association, the World Small Animal Veterinary Association, like name an association, doesn't matter, veterinary
Right.
related, nutrition is considered to be the 5th vital assessment. So it is on par with temperature, pulse, respiration, pain score, and then you have nutrition.
Right.
And it's one of the things that's forgotten most often or
Yeah.
overlooked
Yeah.
or ignored.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really great place to stop and pause for a second.
Yeah.
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 I find it, there's 2 things
So
there.
here,
Go ahead, Nora.
no, yeah, that's probably the same 2 things that I was going to point out. And what I was going to tell the people listening to this, obviously, is that you and I are coming to this from this independently, but we come from the same principles. So we're probably going to be hearing the same things in the same ways, and we're going to be picking them apart in the same way. So we might be alternating a little bit here and there. Sometimes I'll start, sometimes Lauren will start. But yeah, I'll just say, he obviously points out that vets get 2 to 3 weeks of nutrition training. And we have to understand that when these people are talking about nutrition, they're not talking about objectively understanding the physiology and anatomy that allow us to understand the true needs of dogs. What they are talking about is this nutrition pseudoscience that industry has made up. And that's what they're learning. They're learning what big pet food wants vets to then tell their clientele. So that's why it only takes 2 or 3 weeks. I mean, if they were teaching the truth isn't hard. It's very simple. I could teach the truth in one day. So 2 to 3 weeks would be fine if they were actually learning the truth, but they're not. They're learning this other thing. So it's not so much that they're only getting 2 or 3 weeks. It's the substance of what they're learning. And there's another point too in this segment that really illustrates a problem too. And I'll let Lauren take over from here.
Yeah, I was going to say the
Go
one
ahead,
thing
Lauren.
the one thing that struck me was at the end, just that last few seconds of the clip where she had just gone through and admitted that nutrition was of vital importance. And then she said, but it's the thing that as an industry, we routinely just ignore. And, she had this smile on her face, like, oops. But it's literally what's building your cells. It's what's building your health or your disease. And they treat it like an oops, like, oh, we know it's really important, but oops, we just forgot to learn about it. And I also thought it was, sorry, go ahead.
And she pretends that they're doing something about it now with this new program that they have of board certifying nutritionists. Yeah. She says, this is a big problem and we're fixing it. No, they're not fixing it. They're allowing big pet food to have even more influence over what vets do and recommend than they already do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's just, if we're just expanding upon an already broken system, then we're not making any headway. So if they're starting out with 2 to 3 weeks of the wrong information, and now they're creating a program where they're going for 2 or 3 years of course study into the wrong information, the information provided by the pet food manufacturers who profit off of this product they want to sell, then we're going in the wrong direction. So,
Absolutely. It's not making the problem go away. It's making the problem massively bigger,
but it's
much bigger.
interesting to note that they do recognize that even though nutrition is of vital importance, they are ignoring it. They're actively admitting that they're ignoring it. So,
Right. But in their admission, what they're saying is, here's an opportunity to build a new industry.
yeah,
We're building this new sub industry of big pet food called board certified nutrition.
mhm.
And it's building credibility into that new system,
That new
even before it
industry.
exists. I mean, she's a pioneer in it, right?
Yeah. So, all right, let's continue on.
Okay.
But they're, the companies that have a designated nutrition department with multiple credentialed people on there. So you get different points of view, different aspects. I love to see the combination of a PhD and a board certified nutritionist, because that veterinary nutritionist is going to have the medical aspect. The PhD might have more of that formulation aspect. And
Right.
together, they'll create this beautiful diet. And then are they willing to be transparent? If you call and say, I need the salt level because there's cerebral edema, and they're like, but that's proprietary. Okay, then you're not going to feed it, right?
Right.
And so the Pet Nutrition Alliance makes it easy. You can just put in whatever brand and it'll give you the answers to those questions, which is awesome.
A couple of things about that clip. The first thing she says is she assesses various brands based on whether they have these so-called credentialed experts on staff. Credentialed means trained by Big Pet Food. Credentialed means they've gone through the educational system and they've learned what the educational system wants to teach people. Unfortunately, as we know, industry has greatly unduly influenced the educational system. And that's how this information that they're spreading out to vets is protected. That's how the gate is guarded. The truth doesn't get in. What makes industry run gets taught in the veterinary educational system, has nothing to do with what's best for animals. And she's mentioning salt, like she wants to be able to call a pet food company and say how much salt is in your product because we want to feed low salt because of this edema or whatever that's going on in the patient. And I'm thinking, what on earth are they putting salt in dog food for? Salt it should never go into a dog at all. It has no place in dog food. It does only harm. You should have more control than having to get on the phone and say, what are these additives that you're putting in the food that I'm feeding to this sick dog? If that's all the control you think you have over what your dog is fed, you're lost, because you're giving all your control to that company over there. So that's just crazy. And she's still confining her thinking to one brand versus another brand. And that just reveals that what she is learning is commercial pet food. She's learning how to assess commercial pet foods, what their ingredients are, what they have, and who runs the companies, whether they have these credentialed experts on staff, all of the wrong criteria for assessing, food. We're talking about food here. We're not talking about something arcane or mysterious. We have to feed ourselves. It's not that hard. It's not hard to figure out that we need fresh foods. We need to eat certain foods in order to be healthy. It's what builds every cell in our bodies. Why on earth shouldn't that information apply to dogs? They just eat a slightly different range of foods. That's all. But all of the principles of health still apply to them. That's being ignored in this information that they're passing along.
Yeah,
What do you think, Lauren? Do you have anything to add?
absolutely. And it's also telling that she's talking about this system where you can just type in the dog food and it's going to list off how much salt and all of these other chemicals and things that should not be in food, things that are not in actual food. So it's almost like looking at a database for a product. It's not looking at food. It's not looking at some sort of whole substance that's going to nourish our dog's bodies. It's looking at a sales data sheet. And, the certified nutritionist is the salesperson. They've got, car A with these features and these selling points, and they got car B. That's what we're selling here. We're selling pet food A and pet food B. This one's got more salt. This one's got more potassium. This one's got more CBD oil, or all of these things that none of this should be in the pet food to begin with.
Right.
And then they're saying, oh well, we've got this sick dog, so we're going to try to tweak this tiny little thing here instead of removing the cause of why the dog's sick in the first place.
Right.
Which is
Right.
the fact that you're putting a product instead of food into their body.
Right. Right. Exactly. Okay, go ahead and roll it.
All right.
The longest. They invest their finances in quality, peer-reviewed, and publicly available research. They do feeding trials. They have stringent quality control measures for the ingredients that are sourced and for their products as a whole. And the ones that come to mind are usually the ones that the clients are hesitant to use: Purina Hills and Royal Canin. But I compare it to Starbucks, right? Like, for the longest time, I tried to drink local coffee and support the local team.
Well, in this clip, she's just talking about how she trusts the big companies, and she's sort of promoting the idea that bigger is better, and there's a reason why the companies are big, and it's because they're good. That's absolutely not what that means. It might be true in some fields, in some products, but it's absolutely not the case in commercial pet food, because what makes you big in commercial pet food is PR, advertising and marketing, beautiful packages, getting proper placement on grocery store shelves, getting your commercials into TV programs, and it's probably different with the internet now, but using the internet and media in ways that promote your products. It's teaching your product selling. It's getting that into the curricula of the schools where vets are trained. That's what makes you big. It absolutely is not a matter of sourcing the best ingredients, finding out objective information about what dogs really need, making sure all of those things get into pet food. That's absolutely not what makes a company big in the pet food arena.
Yeah.
So.
And business rule number one is buy low, sell high. So
Yes.
If you're big, you've learned the art of buying the cheapest ingredients and then communicating to the customer via marketing that this product is of higher quality than it actually is, so that you can sell for the highest price possible. So I thought her reference to Starbucks, and we paused in between, but her reference to Starbucks being the best coffee because they are the biggest chain is so funny to me, because that's not what most people think of. Most people think of Starbucks as being convenient and maybe your brand loyal.
I don't know anything about coffee. I was going to actually concede the point that Starbucks might have figured something out that, it might, the fact that they're big might actually have to do with their higher quality. I don't know. But I do know that in pet food, bigness is not better. Bigger is not better.
I don't know a whole lot about coffee either, since I don't drink it, but I do know that some of my coffee connoisseur friends wouldn't be caught dead in a Starbucks because they're like, this is
really
the cheapest coffee, but that's big business.
Really?
It's like saying, McDonald's, like, oh, McDonald's is big because they sell a quality product that's good for your health. I mean, I think just about everybody knows that McDonald's is not selling something good for your health. So, it's the same equivalent. If you're buying from the biggest dog food producers, you're not getting a quality product. You're getting the product that they could make for the absolute cheapest,
McDonald's,
that they could sell for the highest price. You're getting the McDonald's in a bag.
Right.
All right, shall we begin again?
That's a perfect analogy. Absolutely. And go ahead.
So much better, and I was like, no, but there's a reason why they're a big brand. They did it right.
Yeah.
And the same thing for Purina Hills and Royal Canin. They've been around, they've invested in the research. They, let the research be available. There's a diet out there that says it cures cancer, but they won't show me the data. I'm not going to use it, because they're full of crap.
I just want to pause there real quick, because You know,
Yeah,
she
go ahead.
says that they invest in the materials that market what they want to sell. So what we have
And
to
there, and
understand is that these clinical studies that they're quoting are paid for by the manufacturer. They're set up just in the same way that we have human trials that advertise that this unhealthy thing is actually healthy, or for example, a great example is the coconut oil versus butter. Right? They came out with all of these studies that showed that coconut oil was healthy for humans, but what they failed to provide to the public, the information they failed to provide to the public, was that they were doing a direct comparison of butter versus coconut oil, and the coconut oil was a teeny tiny little bit less damaging than the full fat butter. They never compared it to no oil at all. And if you compare it to no oil at
Right.
all, it's like not even on the screen. But this is what they do with these clinical studies, is that the studies are paid for.
Right.
They're expensive to run. So they're paid for by the people who have skin in the game, who have
Yes.
a desire to
Yes.
market the information that they find. And they set up the studies in such a way that it's a very narrow scope of data. And then that narrow scope of data compares one unhealthy thing versus another, maybe slightly less unhealthy thing. And then they can say, oh, there was a 0.2 variance. And so now we can say, this slightly unhealthy thing, slightly less healthy thing, less unhealthy, is
Mhm.
worlds better because we've got this, comparison. But you're not comparing to a whole food. You're comparing one unhealthy thing versus another unhealthy thing and saying we have this marginal improvement, so therefore this is better. But that's not objective. That's not looking at things. That's not looking objectively
Right.
at health.
And she said, well, she makes the point of saying that they've made their research publicly available. And the problem is dog owners aren't reading those studies. They're listening to the marketing message. They're listening to what they hear on TV and what they see on the labels, the beautiful labels, the pictures and the websites and all of that. They're not reading the studies. So it doesn't matter whether they made them public or not. I don't know that they have. And another point that she made in the previous clip was that the public is hesitant. She said these are the companies that the dog owning public, is most hesitant to feed. And I thought that was really an interesting admission, because we have to recognize that this hesitancy on the part of the dog owning public has arisen in spite of this overwhelming positive message that we get about dog food wherever we look. It's in magazines, it's in books. When we take our animals to the vet, we get nothing but a commercial for commercial pet food. It's everywhere. In spite of all of that, the billions of dollars that this industry is spending on sending this message to the public is still saying, we're not buying it.
Yeah.
And she admits it right there.
Yeah, that's really telling. It's really telling. And she seems
Yeah.
to also be saying, don't trust your own judgment.
Gaslighting.
Don't trust your own judgment. You don't know what you're talking. You don't know what you're thinking. You can't see these things that are obvious to the public. Believe the message, believe the marketing, believe in these, top producers, because, they're going to tell you the truth, because, of course, everybody who's trying to make a profit is just 100% honest. So,
Right.
yeah, it's very telling.
Okay, roll the video.
It doesn't mean that other diets are bad. I feed my pets, all of them are actually currently on Royal Canin because they have very specific disease states. They're all lemons, of course. But my parents feed dog chow.
Stop it
I
there.
have to stop there for a second. Why would I want to take nutrition information from a person
Okay,
whose
go ahead.
dogs are all unhealthy? She doesn't think there's anything wrong with that. When I watched this the first time, I was just like,
yeah,
it's a huge
I know.
disconnect.
And she's saying they're medical lemons. She's saying they're medical lemons, like they came from the factory defective. It doesn't work that way. The disease doesn't work that way. it's just absolutely, this is an admission of failure, and the only reason why people can't see it is because her industry is telling everyone that disease is inevitable, and that we have absolutely no control over it. So that's what the overlying message of what she's saying right there is, if I, with all of this training in nutrition, don't have control over my own animal's health, who I love. I mean, I want them to have the best. I want them to be healthy. Even I don't have control over their health. How on earth can anybody else have control over their dog's health if my animals are sick? So she's teaching helplessness in this clip of this video right here. That's what she's teaching you. She's telling you you have no control, you're helpless, and just live with it. It doesn't matter what you feed from the big companies. It doesn't matter. So
Yeah.
yes.
Exactly.
Okay, go ahead.
And their
Yeah.
pets do fine because the
Yeah.
diet is complete and balanced. It's from a reputable manufacturer, and they do fine.
Right. So what do you tell somebody who, like, a friend of mine recently said, I'm feeding my dog these brown kibbles. How can this be good for my dog? He was literally trying to walk me through, like, how
Yeah.
can this be good for my dog? I'm feeding him what looks like just out of a sci-fi movie, like a ration that you would get on a spaceship.
Sure.
Like, so how do you get through the disconnect, or is that just a false view of like what the food actually is?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that comes from anthropomorphization, right? So when we think of healthy food,
Yeah, there's just another comment where they're trying to tell you, do not trust yourself, do not trust your own
Right.
judgment. Trust the industry, trust the people that are profiting off this product. Definitely don't trust your own logic and ability to rationalize. It's very telling.
Right. And if you do that, what he's saying is, if you do use your senses and you see that this is a hard brown pellet that doesn't bear any resemblance to any normal food that a dog would eat in the wild, he's saying that that's a disconnect. And that's gaslighting. That's telling you to ignore what you can see with your own eyes and think with your own brain, and go instead with this message that you're hearing from industry. So it's ridiculing your ability to use your own senses and your own ability to discern what's good and bad. And she'll further compound that with her comments coming up. So go ahead and roll that if you're ready, Lauren.
when we think of healthy foods, we think of staying to the outsides of the grocery store, buying unprocessed, whole fruits and vegetables, whole grains, that sort of thing. And the truth is, humans in general, and I'm not a human doctor, just to be clear, we are really, really bad at doing what's right for us. We have no self-control. It's really easy to eat bad, high calorie, high sugar things. And when I say bad,
I'm well
again,
aware.
I know, me too, right? Like, so case in point, you're looking at her. But the thing is, like, one of the things that I love about nutrition in general, and the same is true for humans, most things aren't bad in moderation, but humans just, we're really bad at
Yep.
doing things in moderation.
Because you never know when it's the last time you're going to eat.
Right, exactly. You never know if this is going to be your last glass
In
of wine,
theory.
right? Exactly. And so, in general, what we try to do as humans to make our diet better is add color, because typically that means there's different nutrients that are available, different vitamins and minerals. We try to stay away from more of the processed things, because processed food, again, it's not bad if you eat it in moderation, but it tends to be very calorically dense and very nutrient light. So it's just mostly sugar, right? And sugar isn't bad, again, just in moderation. With pet foods, so if we ate the same thing over and over, we would absolutely be nutrient deficient, because our diets are not complete and balanced. For pets, it's completely different. So the pet foods that we are feeding, or at least that I advocate to feed, they are called complete, meaning they have all of the nutrients that an animal needs, all the essential nutrients, and they're balanced, which means that all of those nutrients are in the appropriate concentrations and proportions.
Right.
And so it's perfectly safe, as long as the company is reputable and is
play the whole thing, but she starts out talking about how we're always told that for human health, we should eat from the perimeter of the grocery store. We should eat from produce, fruits, vegetables, and the meat, and stay away from the center of the store where all the processed food is sold. And she's making a contrast between humans and dogs. She's saying that's fine for humans, that's good for humans. But now she's going to try and make a case for that not being true for dogs without giving us a reason why. Didn't we both evolve as species on this planet? Didn't we both evolve eating fresh food, eating food that's, uncooked, unprocessed, doesn't have chemicals in it, doesn't have additives, and has been sitting on a shelf for 6 months? Um, why on earth would that be true for humans and not true for dogs? If we're told to eat foods that have color in them, the foods that dogs eat in the wild have color too. Why isn't it true for them? So it's once again gaslighting. It's saying don't trust what you know is true. Don't trust what you know is true. Instead, trust the big pet food companies.
Yeah. And ultimately what they're saying is don't trust nature. Dogs, wild dogs, coyotes, wolves, that, we can look to coyotes and wolves and see what they're eating out in the wild. They're eating, whole foods, whole prey and whole fruits. And that's what our dogs need as well. We're seeing them say this, and they're not giving any sort of rationale for it other than believe us because we're an expert, which is a logical fallacy. Just because somebody's an expert, that does not mean that they actually are telling the truth or that they know the truth.
Right.
But we can look to nature and we can see what the truth is. And the funniest thing about this is, that pet food was invented maybe in the 40s or 50s. So we're roughly looking at maybe 100 years of this industry existing. So all dogs prior to the invention of the pet food industry ate whole foods, like the same things from the grocery store that are on that perimeter.
Right.
If they lived on a farm and the farmer grew fruits and vegetables, the dog ate the fruits and vegetables and the eggs and left the remains from the chicken or the cow or whatever was, the side, whatever was left over from the dinner table from the humans. And we evolved with dogs for exactly that reason, because they saw us as a good source of scraps of food. We were eating fruits. They wanted the fruits that are less ideal. And I was having an interesting conversation the other day with a friend of mine, and we were talking about how interesting it is that there's actually less competition in nature than we perceive, because for example, the human eats the fruit that is on the tree. We have hands that are there to pluck those fruits from the tree. And so at that point, when the fruit is on the tree, it's at an ideal state in sugar and concentrations, and the proteins and amino acids are all in the appropriate state for our digestion. Whereas dogs, they want a little bit more ripe fruit. So they're eating the stuff that's fallen on the ground.
Right.
So, the stuff that's fallen on the ground is a little bit too far gone for us, but it's perfect for them. And so same goes for when we gather our fruit and then we toss it into the compost pile, and they're at the compost pile. And that's how we actually got to live with dogs, is because we were eating ideal foods for them. And they were adapted to eating the overripe stuff, the stuff that we're throwing away. And so it became this perfect symbiotic relationship. So to now say that because for the last maybe 100 years, we've been selling this product in grocery stores in a bag that's dehydrated and burnt brown balls, that is somehow now an appropriate food for their physiology is just illogical, irrational, and they're not offering any explanation. It's just
and here she invokes for the first time the concepts of complete and balanced. And it's really important to point out that this idea of complete and balanced is these terms have been invented whole cloth by industry. A dog absolutely does not need to eat in every meal every nutrient that they might come across in their entire lives, or even that they might need. It's absolutely crazy to think that wolves that are going to a blueberry patch or a huckleberry patch for, a month out of the year or 2 months out of the year or whatever they do, and eat their fill of blueberries every day. Where on earth are we getting this idea that that's not complete and balanced because it's only composed of one food? When they go, take down a deer or whatever, that's not complete and balanced according to this industry, but that's what we see dogs doing. And we have this, it's such a distinct contrast between what this industry is pushing and what we see in reality, what we see dogs thriving on when we convert them in our own lives, our domestic dogs, and what we see dogs eating in the wild. That's the disconnect. The disconnect is not recognized, is not, looking at a brown kibble and saying, I don't think that's food. That's not the disconnect. That's the truth. The disconnect is between reality and what this industry is telling us. So this complete and balanced thing, they use that as a criteria to judge all foods that are fed to dogs, and it's made up. It's just made up criteria. It's like, let's invent something by which to judge all things, and then all things will pass our judgment. It's completely backwards. It's crazy.
And where it really stems from is how do we market this product that does not look suitable? How do we market this? And so what they're doing is, first of all, we have to think logically and look at nature and look at physiology and say, how does a dog eat? Does a dog have multiple stomachs in order to digest a protein and a fruit at the same time? Because each of those foods requires a different pH in order to break down efficiently. And if we're putting a meat and a fruit together, one of them's going to ferment and the other one's going to rot before they digest because they're not in the appropriate pH. So we look at nature and we say,
and let me just say, Lauren, let me just point out that that's exactly what you have to do in order to call something complete and balanced, because you have to miscombine lots of different foods together in the same food in order to say this is complete.
Yeah. In order for it to be complete, it has to have the fruit and the vegetables and the meat all in one little brown burnt ball. And then we look at nature and we say, well, physiologically, that's not appropriate. That's not how the digestion works. And then we look at nature as it works, and we see the wolf eating. We don't see a wolf taking down a hare and then running over to the vegetable garden and pulling up some carrots and bringing them over the hare, and then going to the blueberry bush and picking a few blueberries and putting them over here to create a balanced meal. That's not how nature works. That would be absurd.
Ridiculous.
But that's exactly what they're doing here. They're saying, this thing is absurd, but we're going to convince you that you are wrong and your senses are wrong, and this industry giant is correct. And what it really comes down to is they had the leftover trimmings of bone and fat from the human meat markets, meat being sold to humans, the vegetable scraps, we had all of this excess grain that we needed to get rid of that was cheap filler. And so they mixed all of these things together and they said, oh, we have this product. Now, how do we market this product to convince people that all of this leftover trash is something great and something that they want to be feeding to their precious pets? And so that's where this stems out of. It's this marketing spin that it goes in complete opposition to nature and to our own senses.
Right. Okay, go ahead and roll the video if you're ready.
Their entire life, because they're getting everything that they need. Now, if you were feeding them human food, absolutely not. Most of the severely detrimental nutrition cases I've seen is homemade diets gone bad because they're not complete and balanced. And the pet parent thought they were doing what was best, but because the nutrients weren't there, they were in the wrong proportions. It resulted in catastrophic consequences. Right. And so feeding brown cereal it's fine because it's complete and
Because it's not,
balanced.
I think people think it's like, cornflakes or
Exactly. And
something
it
like that, but it's
absolutely
really
is
not.
not. It absolutely is not.
The companies don't, from what I gather, the companies don't, they say, okay, look, we don't need to make this look, a certain way
Yeah.
to a dog or a cat because they don't
Right.
care.
Because they don't care. But the humans care.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the pet caretakers that care
Yeah.
more than the pet does.
Which is why you're seeing some of those beautiful, like home delivery options.
I just have a quick point that I wanted to make about what he says about cornflakes. And what I would say is that kibble most definitely is exactly like cornflakes. It's exactly like cornflakes. If we, humans, at least the people who market human food, they and the nutritionists that are trained in medical school or whatever, they believe the humans are omnivores, which they just think that we're set up to eat whatever will pass through our lips. Whatever we can fit in our mouths, we should be able to eat. So what these people are claiming is that if we did for humans what we do for dogs in terms of putting all the foods that we might ever need in our lives together in one food and making it a little hard kernel and putting it in a bag, don't you think we would have done that by now? We don't do that for humans because we know it's not possible. We know that we would become sick if we did that. They do try. I mean, you've seen these cereals called Total, right? They don't call it Total because it's partial. They call it Total because it has all the nutrients in it that your body could possibly need, right? So, okay, so yeah, kibble might not be like cornflakes. Maybe it's like Total. But everybody knows that you can't sit down and eat Total 3 times a day and be healthy. You can't feed that to your kids 3 times a day and have healthy kids. But they are claiming that we can do that with dogs because, people who claim that something like Total is an appropriate human food or is something that's healthy that you could live on for the rest of your life. They're not talking about nutrients in the proper context of the food. They're talking about food fragments. They're talking about crystallized fragments that have been separated from their natural context and cannot be absorbed and assimilated and used by the body. And we can't do that with humans, and we can't do it with dogs either. It's a huge experiment gone bad that nobody's recognizing because of the marketing efforts of this industry. So go ahead, Lauren.
I think the results speak for themselves. I believe we're at 50% of dogs get cancer.
Right.
So, and something like 75, 80% of dogs have a chronic disease by age 8 or 10. I mean, does that not speak volumes? I mean, we're clearly doing something wrong. And, another thing we need to look at is if you look up the average age of death of a golden retriever in 1970, so just 50 years ago, golden retrievers were living to an average age of 17 years. And if you look at the average age today, it's about 9 or 10 years. So we have effectively, by feeding kibble, cut their lifespan in half by 50% reduction in life. That speaks volumes. That tells us unequivocally that complete and balanced is not health. So.
Right. There's a in this next few minutes of the video, there's a lot that is said that is just so easily refutable. So I guess we can let it roll. Let the video roll for a few minutes or whatever, and I'll try to make quotes. Otherwise, we're going to be here all day.
Yeah, we may chop things out a little bit if it starts to run too long, but we'll try to keep as much of the video in so you guys can get the context of the video, but we're going to edit it a little bit so that we're not just running on forever. So, all right, let's move on.
Beautiful, like home delivery options, like stop feeding, bad kibble to your pet, get this delicious like meat and rice blend. And it's pretty. They're really pretty. Right. They are also very costly, but they're not necessarily superior to the kibble by any means. That a pet could do very well on it or very poorly on it. It's all about the individual and if the diet is appropriate for their disease state and their physiologic state. Right. And you get the kibbles and bits, which have like the beautiful red colors. Some people really like that. And then you get some of the more natural folks that are like fake dyes, like this is terrible. Why would you dye it? Well, they dyed it for the pet parents, you know, like to
Right.
make it look pretty.
Right.
So,
And they dye the salmon that they're probably eating too, that they
oh,
think
for
is
sure.
organic. And
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
exactly.
yeah. Okay, so I think that segues pretty nicely into a question that I've managed to make about 20 minutes in without asking you directly, and that is the raw food topic.
Yeah, sure.
Would you say this is the number one thing that you maybe battle against as far as like falsehoods and people's perception, and that you're constantly working uphill against?
That and grain free, but yeah, raw. I
That was
think
going to be my
yeah,
next question.
yeah, absolutely. Those are the top two. So do you want me to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you, like, where do you think this all came from as far as wanting to
Yeah.
feed raw diets, and then segue into that. Yeah.
Sure. So again, I think one of the things that we pet parents, and I'm a pet parent too, like to do is search for ways, you know, to optimize the health of our pets. And don't get me wrong, I had the most beautiful German Shepherd mix, passed away at 8, and I felt so robbed. Like if I could have had him be around for another 8 to 10 years, like if that was reasonable, I would have honestly done almost anything, short of selling my children. But sometimes I think about it.
Fair enough.
But you know, if, like honestly, and so I totally understand that pet parents in this world where we have no control or minimal control are trying to grasp onto something that have control. And so again, anthropomorphizing, you know, we think of like raw fruits and vegetables, raw juices as being very healthy for humans. So why wouldn't that be the case for animals? And there have been a couple studies. They're not, in my opinion, they don't have a high impact factor. There's a couple of holes in the studies that demonstrate or potentially support that a raw type diet might have a very slightly higher digestibility than a processed diet, but it is
Right.
not clinically significant. And in those studies, apples to apples were not compared.
Right.
So what I mean by that is the nutrient profile of the raw diet was not equivalent to the nutrient profile of the not raw diet. They have to be equivalent to truly make a comparison.
And didn't they also not determine like whether or not cooking the food removes those nutrients too? Isn't that
Yeah. So
okay.
I mean, it is absolutely true that there are nutrients that have different.
Little clip that that we can talk about. Um, the fact that they battle against raw food, and the way he asks the question is, where on earth does this idea come from that dogs might need raw food? Like, that's, how could anybody dream up something so crazy? Humans need raw juices and raw fruits and vegetables, and we know it's healthy for us, but that's not true of dogs. And once again, she's saying that there's some distinction there, and she's not explaining what the distinction is. Why on earth would raw food be good for humans but not for dogs?
And
And
the only
her
the
go ahead, go ahead.
only excuse that she gives is she keeps using this term, which is anthropomorphizing, which for those who don't know, anthropomorphizing means putting human traits onto a dog. So when we dress our dogs up in cute little dresses, that's anthropomorphizing. That's saying my dog is like a baby. Looking at nature and seeing that nature is eating raw whole foods is not anthropomorphizing. That is using objective science to view what is working, nature is working correctly, comparing it to what is not working, our dogs being fed kibble or getting cancer at a rate of 50%, and saying, I want to go with the thing that works. That's not anthropomorphizing. That's not putting human traits onto a dog, but that's, she's using that, again, logical fallacy. She's using the I'm an expert, so I must be right. She's using big words to try to make herself seem like she knows what she's talking about. And then, the host is using this gaslighting technique of setting up the question, using a leading question to set in your mind before you even have the information that, oh, this is crazy. It's crazy to eat whole, real foods in their raw, real form. Where did we ever come up with this idea? And you're insane if you believe that we should, eat whole foods, or your dog should eat whole foods. Your dog's not a human. It's just completely false logic.
And once again, once again, she is selling the idea that you don't have any control, because what she said is it's another admission of failure because her German Shepherd died at age 8 in spite of her best efforts. And if a person with all of the knowledge that she has about nutrition has a dog that dies at 8, then clearly nobody has any control. So once again, we're being told that we are helpless. And that's, that's the bottom line. They're going to get into this in this next clip. They're going to be getting into the loss of nutrients, and that's a huge it's a huge fallacy that they're selling here, that we'll need to talk about. But anyway, if you're ready, Lauren, you can go ahead and roll that part.
That's absolutely true that heat can degrade or reduce, certain nutrients. But again, when we think about commercial products that are complete and balanced, a very, very smart person who's smarter than me has taken degradation rates into consideration.
Okay.
And so they have calculated, they said, okay, this nutrient degrades at this temperature this much. So we have to add this much to make sure that the diet, when it's done, contains an appropriate amount.
You arrive at
and
a
then
certain amount.
Yeah, and then they test it to make sure that they haven't overdone it, or underdone it,
Right.
which brings back that quality control factor.
What they're talking about there is, the host had mentioned that there's some information. I don't know if he mentioned something about a study that said that nutrients are lost, but this idea of losing nutrients when you cook food, it's not like they're lost, they're floating around in the air. What happens to nutrients when you cook them is it binds the atoms together, the molecules together, so that they can't be taken apart by the body. They're rendered unusable and unrecognizable by the body. So what this nutritionist is saying, that yes, we admit that some of the nutrients are lost, meaning they're destroyed. So what we're going to do is we're going to add more nutrients, but they're not adding real nutrients to the food. They're adding more fake nutrients. They're adding fragments of foods like, supplements, these vitamin powders and whatever. They're adding more fake stuff into the food, which makes it just contains then more indigestible stuff in the food. It's not made better by the addition of these, and that's where they're inventing their own criteria for judging their products is very handy, because their criteria is all the nutrients have to be there. Doesn't matter if they're usable or by the body or not. If they're there, that's our criteria, and that's the important part. And that's what they're using. That's not what we should use. We want our dogs to eat food that is going to be digestible and assimilable and usable, and it will keep them healthy and will actually be used to make cells in the body and whatnot. So that's, their criteria is different from our criteria. And so that's how we can separate ourselves right off the bat. What do you think, Lauren?
Well, I like to use two analogies here when these people are talking about these type of things. First of all, imagine you have a house and your house catches on fire, right? You've applied fire to your house. Now you look at those burnt beams. Do you say to yourself, I want to rebuild this house with those burnt beams? Those are suitable materials for my house. That's what we're doing. We're saying, here is this food that was good in its whole form. We're going to set it on fire. We're going to see that it's now weakened. Its structure has changed. It is no longer a suitable food because it's missing all of the stuff that it had in it. So, we're going to build our house with it anyway. But wait, now we need to sell it to the customer, and the customer's saying, but wait, cooking it removes these things. So now we need to add things back. Okay, so now we're going to add things back, and we're going to say, well, we can't add them back in whole food form because when we cook whole foods, they just break down when we set it on fire. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to add rocks. So here is your dog's food. It is burnt whole foods that are denatured and have been stripped of their value, and a pile of rocks. And for some reason they say,
right,
that's good, that's going to work, that's balanced and complete. So, we're just,
right.
It's just logical fallacies all over the place. The other thing
I love that analogy. I love that analogy of the burnt beams, because it's like you're saying those burnt beams are are never going to be able to hold up my roof. And the pet food industry is going to come in and say, but we'll give you lots more burnt beans.
Exactly.
And if we put lots of burnt beans in there, it'll hold up the roof.
Yeah. No, it
It's
won't.
insanity. Anyway, go ahead with your next point.
Yeah, and then the other thing was, I thought it was interesting. They're using a straw man logical fallacy. They're saying, we know that raw food is winning the hearts and minds of people because it just makes sense. It's logical. So we're gonna just pick apart this tiny little thing instead of addressing as a whole. Okay, raw is whole and raw and complete and not burnt and not missing and not the burnt wooden beams. We're just gonna say, oh, nutrients. As long as we add in those nutrients, we're gonna be superior to the raw food, because when you're doing the raw food, you're not getting enough variety or whatever it is they're trying to say here. So they're taking what the true argument is and saying, don't listen to their argument. We're only going to give you 1% of their argument, and we're going to represent it as the whole argument. And then we're going to argue against that. It's called a straw man, misrepresenting the other party's argument.
Right. Exactly.
So.
Yes, exactly. Good
All right, let's see what else they have to say.
Okay.
Don't have the privilege of being able to endorse raw because I am also a public health professional. All of us veterinarians are. Right. And the public health risk associated with feeding raw is significantly higher than any anecdotal benefit that is out there. The benefits have not been proven. They're all anecdotal.
And they're all the same anecdotes too.
And they're all the same anecdotes. And that doesn't mean that they don't.
Hair, coat, breath, and poop quality.
Teeth and poop, right?
We can talk about right there.
Yeah, just real quick though, that's another straw man logical fallacy that the only benefits are teeth, coat, and hair, or whatever he said. It's like, that's not true. He also said they're all the same anecdotes. He also said there's only anecdotal evidence. None of those things are true. But this is what they do. They know that the average audience isn't looking at the clinical studies. They're not looking at what's actually being seen. They're not looking at what's seen in nature. And they're looking to the experts to provide them with the answers. And so he's sitting here presenting this information as though it's truth when it's completely false.
And what he's saying is, he said that it's the same three anecdotes. Well, an anecdote is a story. An anecdote is someone's experience. So you have millions of people experiencing reversals of skin issues with their dogs. You have millions of people reversing their whatever other issues he pointed out, the teeth issues, seeing the tartar and the plaque fall off of the teeth when the dogs are fed properly. You have millions, and they're calling each one of those experiences. That's not three anecdotes. That's three various areas where people have very good experiences when they feed their dogs properly. That it's completely crazy to say that it's always the same and it's only anecdotal. It's kind of like, it's an invented word that industries use as an excuse to not investigate something. So, okay, we can say that one person having one anecdote, that's not worth investigating. But what if we have millions of people having experiences? Isn't that worth investigating? This industry would say no. It's not worth investigating. We're going to look away from it. We're going to pretend that it doesn't exist. And that way we can keep researching fake fragments of food and seeing how the various formulations, sell to the public, and spending our money on putting different words on our products so that the public will buy it, instead of actually putting food into the products. So like you said, Lauren, it's just setting up straw man arguments.
And it's just an utter falsity as well. I mean, just in my own dogs, we have far more anecdotes than three. I mean, I don't think I've ever written about my dog's hair or teeth. I mean, I've written about their teeth, the plaque falling off their teeth, but that's not where I'm looking. I'm looking at reversal of cancer, stopping seizures,
the vital organs, right?
Blind dogs seeing again, deaf dogs getting their hearing back, heart murmurs reversing. These are not the three meaningless anecdotes that he's throwing out there. He's literally either he's just ignorant of what is really out there, which is certainly a possibility. Being a vet, he probably has received very little nutrition training, and the marketing that he does get, within the industry keeps him from actually doing objective research. But
Right.
it's either that or he's being truly just disingenuous and just lying. But because the fact of the matter is,
it's kind of a self-fulfilling thing, because he sees the products of the information that he disseminates. So he's telling his customers what to feed their dogs, and he sees the sickness that it produces, and that's all he sees.
Yep.
He doesn't see dogs reversing disease. He doesn't see dogs in the throes of detoxification. He knows nothing about that. Absolutely doesn't know that it's possible, doesn't recognize it. It's those dogs don't end up in his practice.
Yeah.
And if they did, he would be trying to convince the owners to feed the 3 big pet foods.
right. And if he did see the body cleaning itself, they don't understand what that process is, because they don't believe or understand that the body is self-healing. So as soon as they see any of those symptoms that of the body expelling waste, like the mucus in the eyes or mucus in the nose, ear gunk coming out, they are throwing all kinds of toxins at the body to stop those symptoms.
Let's
So
stop
even-
it.
Yeah, so
Right.
even when they do see a dog attempting to heal, they're going to work against the body to stop that healing process. So they have just
Right.
literally no baseline experience to draw their conclusions from. So all they're going by is, this is what the pet food industry that comes into my office, the pet food rep that comes into my office every week is telling me to believe. So this is what I'm going to believe, because I consider them to be experts. Problem is the person selling you
Right.
something really an expert? Or are they just a salesman?
Okay, and this next segment that we're going to get into, it involves the area that vets have used the most to frighten people away from proper feeding, and that is germ phobia. And the nutritionist is going to really sell hard. She's going to very hard sell the idea that we have no control over, or we have very little control over these so-called pathogens that we encounter or that our animals are exposed to. That's a huge selling point with the public, because most of the public has accepted the idea that we don't have much control over germs besides inoculation and hand washing. So that's a whole topic here, and we'll have to take it point by point. So go ahead, and with that as prelude, go ahead and roll.
Yeah, I think she already said something to the effect that she doesn't have the liberty to, as a public
Right,
health
right.
officer, to to support raw because of germs. So let's see what else she has to say.
Right.
Absolutely right. And so for me, I'm like, if you own your own chickens and you slaughter the chicken and feed it immediately, yeah, feed raw, because that meat shouldn't have any contamination. But when we think about it, a chicken is slaughtered, it goes to the processing house where there's bacteria that's mixed in, and then it sits there, and then you hope the refrigeration unit, stays, and then it's shipped to our grocery stores where it sits on a counter for a week, and you hope that the refrigeration unit is appropriate, and then we buy it and it sits on our refrigerator for a week, and then we're like, oh no, it's been here for a week, I'm going to freeze it really fast, and then we thought, and then it smells funny, so then we feed it to our dog. This isn't me, by the way.
Not me either.
Right. And so that's so many opportunities for bacteria to be, incorporated into the food, that it is not within the public health service to be recommending that. And again, I work in a specialty hospital. It puts my patients at risk. It puts other veterinarians and veterinary professionals at risk. When I was pregnant with my kids, I got sick way more than I've ever gotten sick, and I washed my hands like a crazy person.
Right.
So it's too risky, in my opinion.
They've done studies that show that bacteria on the food, when given to the dogs, is the same bacteria leaving in their stool.
Yeah, so many things to you want to start, Nora?
Yeah, right. So many crazy things. First, she tells people that She's setting up this impossible scenario, right? If you can slaughter your own chickens, you know, yeah, that's I'm gonna take up slaughtering my own chickens because I really want. Who's gonna do that? Nobody's gonna do that. Nobody's gonna slaughter their own chickens. She knows that, so she's setting up this bar that's impossible to get over. Like nobody's gonna slaughter their own chickens. And if you stay home, if you know, at some point in the video, I don't know if it's this particular segment, but she says at some point, if you stay in your house for the rest of your life, it's fine. But I work around other people. I have to go work in a hospital setting. I can't be spreading germs around. And then she gets into the whole, you know, furthering of the germ, you know, attacking us, helplessness thing by saying when she was pregnant, she got sick a lot, even though she washed her hands all the time. Well, that what that is it's an admission that hand washing doesn't have anything to do with sickness in your body. And but everybody's too brainwashed to see that. They're going to go, yeah, it's absolutely right. The most we can do is wash our hands and hope for the best, and even that doesn't work sometimes. um, so you know, it's just helplessness. It's just willful helplessness.
Yeah, and it's very profitable. I mean, antibiotics are one of the most profitable arms of the pharmaceutical and medical industry. So it's, you know, a very
Right.
profitable message to continue to spread, and wherever we can spread it. We need
Yes.
to understand a couple things. Number one, there's bacteria on everything all the time. We have, you know, the deadly MRSA virus or bacteria is in our nose all the time, not causing disease. We have streptococcus in our throat all the time, not causing any symptoms whatsoever. Because
That's right.
bacteria are nature's recyclers. They break down dead and dying tissue and they recycle it for reuse. So everywhere on our skin, we have little bacteria. We have an army of little bacteria that is working to recycle and replenish us. When a cabbage starts to break down, you cut the cabbage off the vine, it's got its own colony of bacteria that live on the cabbage at all times. And as soon as that cabbage starts to decompose, it ferments. Then we have sauerkraut, right? This is how sauerkraut is
Right.
not created by, you know, magical beasties swarming in from the ether. It's on the plant itself. The plant brings its own bacteria. When we have damaged cells inside of our body, the bacteria inside of our body, that's our own cells. The acids damage the cell changes form. We have cells that change into fungus, into yeast, into bacteria, and a host of other forms in order to
That's right.
you know, be effective in the environment that is now existing. So as our environment, you know, as we change our diet, as we eat, our chemistry changes in our body, and our cells change. Our cells change in order to be able to facilitate the things that need to be facilitated. So right there, you know, we're afraid of germs that are literally our own cells. We're shooting the messenger every time. You know, we call these things infections. But even more importantly, when we're feeding our dogs the raw, where is this bacteria coming from on the raw chicken? Well, it's coming from the chicken itself, and it's just harmless bacteria that's there all the time. And we just happen to blame it that one time when somebody happened to get sick because they ate something unsuitable and their body tried to expel that unsuitable food. We then, you know, petri dish it and say, oh, there's this little critter here. It must be the critter that's causing the problem. The science doesn't back that up. The propaganda does, the marketing does, but the science does not.
Right. Food is not supposed to be sterile. Food has never been sterile in all of the eons during which humans and canines have been evolving on this planet. Like Lauren said, bacteria is everywhere. It's inside your body. It's performing a very important function. And assigning disease to it is like, you know, I'm always using this analogy of assigning disease to bacteria is like rounding everybody up in the lobby of a bank that just got robbed and just saying, okay, one of you guys had to do it. And real robbers are going down the street. while we're looking at the, the tellers and the patrons in the bank, trying to arrest them for the crime, the real robbers are getting away. The real robbers are lifestyle. The real robbers are, we're not looking at the real cause. We're looking at, something that can't possibly cause what the problem was. And in the meantime, the crime continues because the underlying underlying cause is, of course, what you eat, lifestyle choices
Those
that
burnt
builds
brown
every cell in
balls.
your body, like we've said over and over. Right, right, exactly.
The other thing we need to consider and look at is, objectively looking at nature. What are dogs in the wild? What are wolves and coyotes in the wild doing? Do they have refrigerators to refrigerate that prey? Do they have,
Right.
When they take
Right.
down a large deer, an antelope or something, that they're not able to finish in one meal, what happens? Well, we know that wolves and coyotes bury their food, their prey meals. So they're burying them,
Right.
they're coming back to them 5, 6, 7 days later. There's been studies in I think it's in Yellowstone with the wolves where they'll come back 2 and 3 months later to old kills, and they'll eat the remnants of things that they buried.
Right.
So if dogs and wolves and coyotes in the wild are able to eat these bacteria-ridden old foods that even smell off because they've been buried for a week, and they don't get sick, then why are our dogs getting sick?
Right.
And why are we getting sick
Right.
from it? And the answer is we're not. The answer is they're
Right.
blaming, they're shooting the messenger, they're blaming the messenger instead of looking at the true causes of disease.
Right. And as much as this nutritionist wants to make a big deal out of domestic chicken being different, and it is different in important ways from the foods that wild dogs eat, there's nothing different bacteria-wise about those chickens that are coming out of the factory. Bacteria, the same bacteria are going to be breaking down those chickens that are breaking down the 2-week-old elk that the wolf is going to go back and eat later on because he couldn't fit it all in his stomach at one go. But there's serious problems with those products that are coming out of animal agriculture for sure, but bacteria is absolutely not one of them. But bacteria has been chosen by far by the vet industry and big pet food as the way to frighten people away from proper feeding, and it's very effective, and it's capitalized on in this video because for the next, probably the next 10 minutes of the video, we're just being sold this helplessness thing that you have to work really hard to protect yourself against bacteria, and you make yourself very vulnerable by feeding raw food. You make other people vulnerable, that whole virtue signaling thing. You make people around you more vulnerable if you feed raw food. I'm fully prepared for her to say, if you feed raw food, you're a public hazard. And she's basically saying that.
Yeah, and that's exactly the idea that they want to sell is that, if you feed what you know from your own observations, from your own objective observations of nature, if you feed that and you feed that way, that you're then a menace to society that, is bringing all of this bacteria that's going to harm people. But she's just ignoring the science that tells us that there's literally bacteria on every single surface that we touch all the time, 24/7. You're just touching bacteria everywhere you go. So it's just disingenuous. And it's just being disingenuous and just not being honest about what the science actually says.
Absolutely.
Whether that's intentional or just learned ignorance, we don't know, but it's not supported by the science. So shall we continue?
Yes, please.
Their stool, like Salmonella and E. coli, they can trace the exact species of the bacteria.
You are absolutely right. An animal does not have to show clinical illness to be shedding it. And gastric juices are probably not digesting it the way we hope. And the other thing that we have to keep in mind is, animals are kissers, and we kiss our animals and they lick their butts. And, they're gross. Like, I love my pets, but they're very, very gross. And I've got 2 kids, and I do everything I can to keep my kids' faces and mouths and hands away from my dog because she's gross.
I've got a 1-year-old, and I've got a dog who's an 8-year-old little terrier mutt.
Yeah.
And he comes up and licks her, just like that.
Yep.
And every time he does it, I'm like, well, stop doing it. Hey, let's, limit this a little
Sure.
bit. But I also think, like, what if he just crushed a whole raw chicken breast
Oh yeah.
and
Yeah,
had that
exactly. You'd be
all over
getting
his mouth?
salmonella all over there. And, it's one of those things like I tell my clients, my job is to educate, to tell you the risks. It is your job to choose what you will for your family, but also understand the potential public health implications. If
Right.
your dog is a service dog that goes to see geriatric wards or children cancer units, that's really bad juju. Like you should not be doing that. But if you don't ever leave your house and your dog never leaves your house, and you choose to feed raw, that's up to you.
Right.
But the possible benefits do not outweigh the public health risks by any
And
means.
and is there any so the evidence for, again, the teeth, the hair coat, the stool quality, that's, to my knowledge, just people looking at, like, for instance, one study looked at stool quality, and the owners just looked at the stool and gave I think it looks better.
That's good.
Sort of.
Yeah.
That's literally the study.
Yeah, so none of those have been like actually evaluated in a scientific and controlled setting. And the truth is, a lot of those things are really dependent on the nutrient profile. And so, if the nutrient profile is different from a kibble to a raw type diet, then yeah, things will be different.
Right.
The teeth aspect, most people say that, when you include bones in there, it's abrasive, it helps reduce plaque. It also results in GI impaction and obstruction and an emergency surgery or dental
Right.
fractures.
And there's actual case reports of this happening.
Oh, absolutely, there are.
So we kind of segued there from germs into bones, and we probably didn't finish off the my dog's getting after my cat. Callie. Um, sorry. We probably didn't finish up with the bacteria thing. It's, like you said, Lauren, it's more learned helplessness, willful ignorance, and just because the same species the same species of bacteria that's on the food is the same species in the feces that's coming out. Of course, that makes sense because they're decomposing. It's the same food, whether it's digested or not, or undigested or digested. It's still the same food. It's going to have the same bacteria on it that's breaking down the food.
Yep.
And what does that mean? That's pointless. Who cares if it's the same?
Yeah.
It's not deadly. That's the point. It's not deadly. It doesn't cause illness.
Right. And that's
but
that's the thing is if it's going in and coming out and the dog is fine, then where's the illness? Where's the symptoms? Where is the disease that this supposed bacteria creates? And then, another telling thing, the thing that she says is that you don't have to be symptomatic in order to pass along this bacteria. Well, of course you don't need to be symptomatic because the bacteria is not causing symptoms. The bacteria is doing what it's designed in nature to do, which is to help break down the protein tissues or the amino acids in the fruits and assist in our digestion. We have the same bacteria on our foods that help break down our fruits and vegetables so that when they move their way through our digestive tract, we can assimilate things. Dogs have the same bacteria. They're slightly different bacteria strains, slightly different shapes, slightly different sizes because they eat a slightly different diet than us, So, here we have this idea that you can be sick from something, but a million other people. So if item A is causing disease in one person, but not causing disease in 99 people, it's not the cause of disease. It's just the messenger that was there.
Right. If people are paying attention, they would then go, wait a minute, if this thing that you're blaming disease on just passed through a dog's body and did not cause harm, that begs the fundamental question, how can we then assign blame to this so-called pathogen if it goes through the entire body of a dog, comes out intact, which is what he's saying? How can we then be afraid of that little thing? It just came through without causing harm. I know you made that point, but
needs to be reiterated.
People need to just step back. Yeah, people need to just take a step back and go, we need to rethink this whole thing. This just does not make any sense. So, okay, then she's going to get into bones after this, and inventing some more fake, phony criteria for judging what dogs should be fed. So, and did you want to say anything more about kids interacting with dogs and it being unhealthy? I mean, how on earth do you keep a child from petting a dog?
Right. I mean,
Do these people? Why on earth would anybody who's that germ phobic even have a dog? I mean, dogs really, they don't care about germs. They don't have this germ crap in their heads.
Yeah.
So of course they're spreading germs wherever they go. If you're that germ phobic about your kids being exposed to germs, why on earth would you introduce a creature like a dog into your home?
it's so crazy. You know, my little brother, when he was a baby, like a toddler, you know, still in diapers, he would sleep in the dog bed with our dog, and the dog would literally lick him from head to toe every single day. And he was not sick. He's not getting sick from the dog getting licked. I mean, we've all
Right.
been licked a million times by dogs.
Right.
If you own a dog, they're gonna lick you. They're gonna, like, I have dogs that I call it the precision tongue, where if you are not paying attention, they are going to get into the back molars of your teeth. They're going to, you know, give you a kiss
Right.
and you know, lick your back molars. They are so determined. I have dogs that have licked up my nose and in my
Right.
ear. And miraculously, I
Right.
haven't had a cold or a flu or anything in over 7 years. But you know,
Yeah.
germs.
And you know, it can be argued that kibble fed dogs lick their butts even more than properly fed dogs because they got more irritation going on back there.
Mhm.
So, you know, you're not going to stop a dog from kissing a human. They just do that. They lick.
Yeah.
That's what they do. We kiss, they lick.
And that's the thing, it's
If you don't
also,
want your dog to lick his butthole, you know, make sure that the butthole's feeling okay because my dog doesn't lick her butthole.
Yeah.
I mean, they do that if they have irritation there, if they have inflammation there, if they have anal glands getting impacted or full or whatever there. That's why dogs lick their anuses.
yeah, I
So
can't
the
remember the
solution,
last time any of my dogs have licked their butt. It's not something that they do on,
yeah,
you know, I mean, maybe if
it's
they have an
it's
irritation,
pathological.
yeah, it's a
Right.
symptom of disease.
Right.
Yeah, so, and then, yeah, the bones, breaking teeth, I thought that was an interesting,
Yeah, we're going to get into the whole discussion of bones.
yeah,
So
so, yeah,
if you
she
want to,
talked.
you can go ahead and roll that next clip.
You can feed bones, but you might wind up $10,000 later with no dog. Is it
Mhm.
worth the risk? Most of them say no.
Yeah.
And you know, with the hair coat, if their previous diet was lower in essential fatty acids, yeah, the hair coat might be better, but really that's going to be dependent on the fat source and the fat concentration.
Yeah.
And with the stool, most pet foods contain some sort of fiber, which is actually very beneficial for colonic health. Most raw diets have minimal to no fiber. And so the stool character is going to be very, very small, and it's going to be nice and tight and dehydrated. So it might physically look better to the client, but is it healthier? Not necessarily. The beneficial bacteria doesn't have anything to eat now.
Yeah.
They're bouncing around a lot from
That
bones to fiber.
Yeah, the last part though, she's beneficial bacteria. Okay, so
Right.
right, we have magically some of the bacteria is pathogenic, and then other is beneficial, all because it's marketed that way. So yeah, I thought that was really funny.
Right. What she's saying there is that people do feed bones, but we see all the time impaction and we have to go in and do extractions and they break teeth and there's all kinds of hazards associated with feeding bones. But we have to remember that vets see dogs that have eaten bones accidentally, and these are bones that are generally cooked. They're in the trash. They're found, you know, on ballparks or whatever, wherever dogs go, that they find, you know, discarded chicken bones or whatever. Those are bones that can cause problems. They can cause problems if people feed them deliberately. That's not what raw feeders are feeding. Raw feeders do not present to vets. Dogs who are properly raw fed do not present to vets with impaction and obstruction and bone breakage because it's common common knowledge among the raw feeding bones that we have to avoid, one of those being femurs, because they're harder than teeth and they do break teeth. And some bones are, and we have to feed bones raw. When bones are fed raw, they are dissolved in the stomach. When they're fed cooked, they stay impossible for the body to break down a cooked bone. It stays intact, it goes through the stomach intact, and if it has sharp edges, yes, it might perforate the intestine. That's a cooked bone. A raw bone will be dissolved and it will go through the rest of the body as powder, as paste. It comes out as powder. That's what they're talking about when they say that when people feed raw food, they look at the dog's feces and they see a hard, she called it dehydrated. It's not dehydrated, it's compact. That's the way it's supposed to be. All the water has been extracted and used by the body. It takes a longer time for feces to go through the body when dogs are raw fed. And some people claim they worry that that's constipation. It's not constipation. It just takes a long time for all of the nutrients to be pulled from meat. It's a very energy intense food to eat. It's energy intense for whoever eats it, whether we eat it or the dogs eat it. It takes a lot of energy to break meat down into its constituent nutrients and be taken in by the body. So all of these things, once again, are straw man arguments, fallacies that are set up to make the truth look bad.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. It's just another straw man, and it's like a collection of straw man arguments. It's we're saying all bones are bad because cooked bones are not digestible by dogs because dogs don't have the ability to turn on the stove. Like, when was the last time you saw your German Shepherd stand up at the stove and turn the dial? I mean, they're not designed to cook things, which means their anatomy and physiology is not designed to eat things that are cooked. So, misrepresenting what the argument is. Then we've got, the fear mongering. We've got, if you feed your dog a raw bone, you're going to have a $10,000 vet bill and you may not come home with your dog. I mean, right. That's going to strike right. fear into the average, dog owner. Oh my God, I have to take responsibility for this. And, quite frankly, most of us don't want to take responsibility. We want to be told what the right thing is to do. And we don't
right.
we don't want to have to think about it too much. We just want to be able to, put a scoop in their bowl and feel good about it. But yeah, I mean, and then the dental issues again. If you're feeding raw, most people are feeding prey animals that are in line with a natural size prey for their dog. So if you're, feeding a Chihuahua, you're feeding a bird that they, small bones that they can break through with, with their smaller teeth and stuff like that. Most raw feeders know not to feed the heavy weight bearing bones that could potentially cause a bone breakage. My dogs have eaten raw for years now, and I have never seen a fragment of a raw bone come out in anything that looks like a bone. It's when they have a stool, it's literally powder. And I lived in Las Vegas, where it's the desert, so you could leave that stool for 12 hours or so, and then you could just go over and step on it, and it would just become a little puff of white powder, because that's how much they're getting out of that food. And I would give my little Chihuahuas a 14 ounce or so chicken leg quarter with probably 3 or 4 ounces worth of bone. And their system is so efficient that what comes out is maybe an ounce of very compacted powdered white leftovers from the bone. And it's because their body is literally getting everything out of it.
Making use of it, right.
Yeah.
And all of this information, it should not just be known in the raw feeding community. If vets were taught this information, they'd know.
Yeah.
Raw bones are digestible. They dissolve in the stomach. They would know all this information. This is just simple observation. You feed your dog a raw bone and you watch it come out as powder.
Yeah.
And you watch that happen thousands of times. I mean, I've been raw feeding for 25 years. You see that happen thousands of times and you go, That's just what happens.
Yeah.
You know, your dog gets a hold of a chicken bone in the ballpark or whatever and has a problem passing it, and you see it come out whole. I mean, it just has to be gaslighting to be told, you know, for this person to say, um, you know, all bones are now, you know, declared to be hazardous because some are and some aren't. So,
And I really thought the other interesting part was where she talks about how the commercial foods are filled with all this fiber that creates these big fluffy stools. It's like, well, the stool is big and fluffy because it's not being utilized. Most of it is being passed out as waste. You know, if you're feeding something that's appropriate for the body, it's going to come out in small bits because the body needs to utilize what it's putting in. So we don't want to, you know, put in 4 ounces and have 4 ounces coming out. We want, you know, to put in 4 ounces and have a quarter of an ounce coming out. So when we see, you know, the dogs having this big, bulky, you know, stool, you know, we know that they're not getting a lot out of it.
Right. And a point about fiber is that it can't be digested. The fiber that goes in is the fiber that comes out. And if the stools are bulky, it's because the fiber on its way out is absorbing water and it's taking water out of the body. And I mean, I feed fiber to my dog. I mean, dogs have no need of fiber, but in our methods that we use, RMF, fiber or plant foods, it plays a role, and the role is avoiding the overfeeding of those fatty products of animal agriculture. That's not to say, though, that dogs, being facultative carnivores, have any requirement for plant fiber. They don't. And to pretend that they do is absolutely crazy. A wild dog, can live a completely healthy life, never having to resort to eating secondary foods and eating only rabbits or eating only shrews or eating only, you know, field mice or whatever. There's absolutely no need there for any kind of plant fiber. So that's another selling point that we've invented so that we can then sell this product that contains fiber. And, you know, fiber is cheap, let's face it. They don't want to sell kibble that's made up strictly of meat. It would be expensive. It would be prohibitively expensive. So, of course, they're going to then claim that these fillers that they're using are necessary to the diet. It's absolutely not necessary. I admit that, even while I'm feeding fiber to my dog. But I'm not going to claim, you know, that fiber is necessary. It's just not true.
And the other thing to keep in mind too is that when you feed a whole fruit, they're still absorbing and digesting so much more. You know, when you're feeding like a grain, their body is absorbing all of that water.
Right.
It's just fiber. But when you're feeding, say, like a watermelon, for example, I give my guys, you know, I'll split like a 5-pound watermelon among, you know, a couple of the Chihuahuas, and they'll literally scrape it clean so that all that you can see is the white. And then, you know, 8 hours later, they have a stool like this big, and it's completely compacted, and it's just, you could tell it's watermelon stool because it's bright red, but it's literally just the insoluble fibers. They've sucked out everything else. They've gotten all the water out, all the nutrients out, and they just have this little tiny stool. You know, compared to when we were feeding kibble, their stool was always, you know, big, giant, fluffy logs, and you're just like, well, comparing fiber-rich whole foods to a fiber-filled commercial food, even, you know, comparing those two, you can clearly see the difference between what the nutrient is being pulled out of it.
Sorry, Lauren. The fiber that she's talking about is very likely separated from any whole food context.
Right.
So it'll be like it would be like adding wheat germ to your cereal. I mean, people used to do that, you know, but it's powdered, fractionated, a fragment of a food that is going to take water. You know, it's not in the context of the food, so it's going to rob water from the body as it goes through. It's going to, you know, the body's going to have to compensate for that loss. as it digests the food, which it's not able to make use of, obviously, because it's just coming out the other end, and that's what's producing these fluffy poops. So, you know, what we're admitting here is that this fiber, it's useless going in, it's draining energy from the body and fluids on its way out, and it's showing that it did that through its fluffy nature when it comes out the other end.
All right, for the sake of time, we're gonna go ahead and skip forward a little bit here.
So, and what's the role of legumes in all
Yeah,
this?
excellent question. So one of the reasons, so when we think about kibble, right, it's basically a cookie. When you make cookies, you have to have some form of starch in there to make it puff and pop it and maintain its form.
Mhm.
When you don't have an optimal carbohydrate source, you have to choose a different one. So in grain-free diets, grains are great because they have that gluten. It makes everything stick together. It makes the kibble pop and puff. If you don't have that, you have to use a substitute. So we're thinking about like potatoes and cassava and tapioca, things like that, or you know, other legumes. You need more of them typically to make the kibble stick together to pop and puff. But a lot of those tend to be higher in fiber compounds, which can reduce the overall digestibility of the diet and the bioavailability. And then a lot of legumes as well have lower concentrations of those precursors. So it's just, again, kind of all of those things combined. Legumes by themselves, they're not bad. Legumes in a diet, also not bad if the diet has been formulated appropriately. But if it has not been formulated by somebody who knows what they're doing, and or if the product hasn't been tested, the physical compound of legumes could potentially reduce digestibility and bioavailability of these essential nutrients.
Cool.
And if is okay to share a theory of my own, there's an obesity epidemic out there. A lot of
What?
clients, I know, right? You're like, fat docs, I'm done. But a lot of clients like to take weight loss into their own hands. And so they're like, oh, I'm feeding Fluffy 4 cups. The doctor said that Fluffy is fat. I'm going to cut it down to 2 cups, but it's not an appropriate prescriptive weight loss diet. Suddenly, this client has created a nutrient deficiency in their pet because calorie cutting also resulted in nutrient cutting.
Right.
And so one of the things that I find challenging about this whole DCM thing, I have yet to see a full dietary history from any of these cases, unless they come to me, because that's my job, right? Like I get a full dietary history. But there are many cases where the client is underfeeding their dog. So it might not be the diet is the problem. It could be an error in metabolism. It could be that there's nutrient deficiencies from underfeeding, or all of the above.
Yeah, that's so commonly the problem with these sorts of things, is that we don't know the actual medical histories of these individual cases, and you have to be diligent with it to actually find the root cause.
Exactly. And we're relying on clients to give us that information, and a lot of it is biased, not because they're trying to be biased, but it's not what we need.
Perfect example. I worked up a young German Shepherd for what looked to be a brain tumor, possibly a hemorrhagic clot or hemorrhagic stroke, excuse me, a few weeks ago. And the owner insisted that the dog's mother died of a brain tumor when she was the same age.
Gotcha.
And it was,
so you're looking for it.
Yeah. But I looked it up, and the actual pet that she's referencing never had an MRI, never had a formal diagnosis, came in for one seizure and was euthanized.
Gotcha.
And that's it. And so it's like, that just summarizes the whole challenge.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think it's a good time. I've got a few questions. So I've got a pretty popular TikTok. I'm not going to lie. Yeah. So I've got like 50,000 followers. I mean, I'm kind of coming up a little bit here, but, so I had a bunch of people. I posted like, hey, I'm going to talk to a nutritionist, comment with questions. It's just literally just people throwing questions at
Sure.
So, if it's cool with you, I'm going to walk you through a couple of them, and then I'll let you go, because I know you're busy. All right. So I have someone named, and these names are totally insane sometimes, and I had to delete some because I literally couldn't say their name. It would be totally inappropriate. So this one, this question's from 6 White Points. Any red flag ingredients owners should look for in food or treats to not purchase them?
Honestly, not really. Every food that you feed, every treat that you feed is going to be dependent on the individual's tolerance to it. So it goes without saying, it's like any medication, if your dog is allergic to this, don't give it. It's like, okay,
Right.
like, okay.
Right.
In general, so even though there's a lot of regulations are hard to enforce just because of funding for the state departments of agriculture and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. But in general, ingredients have to be either like regarded as safe or generally regarded as safe. They're called GRAS. And so, there are food safe dyes that are in there. I personally don't feed that, but that's my individual philosophy. But they're not harmful to the general population if they are included. Things like sugars, again, not harmful. Most of them do have a purpose. And the truth is, in treats, in foods, if there is an ingredient that doesn't have a purpose, like, it's not going to be in there, because every ingredient has a cost, and the companies are trying to figure out how to make the best product with the least amount of overhead so that they can make money, right?
Right.
And so it doesn't make any sense to put something in there that doesn't have a nutritive function or a physiologic function or a medical function. So in general, when I think of things that are red flags, again, it would be raw ingredients. But again, just because that quality control standard, it's really risky. If there's a company that uses high pressure pasteurization and tests all of their products with a third party, laboratory, and posts its results, I would have way more comfort feeding that raw food than a company that's like, here's a random pizzle stick, from the farm down the road, just because there's no quality control guarantees there. But other than that, not really.
Cool. Rosario with 3 R's asks, is garlic toxic to dogs or not?
That is also a very good question. So and as we were finishing the first question, I was like, oh, I didn't even mention like garlic, onions, grapes. So there is a handful. Yeah. There's a handful of human foods that absolutely can be toxic or harmful to our pets. And so if, you out there are ever like, ooh, I wonder if I could feed this, always ask your veterinarian first. And when in doubt, go to the SPCA toxicity website, and they'll tell you if it's safe or not. Like, really good resources. I don't have even all of them in my brain. But in general, like grapes, wine, like, don't feed. Macadamia nuts, avocado pits, things like that, don't feed. Garlic and onions, to my knowledge, so it absolutely can be harmful. A lot of it is dose dependent, and it's going to be dependent on the form of it. So like one little tiny piece of crushed garlic might not cause an issue, but concentrated ground garlic powder or garlic extract potentially could. So it's really going to be dependent on the form and that individual's reaction to it. So you might have a product that contains garlic, that they are absolutely out there, and a pet eats it for their life and doesn't have a problem. But then you get the cat that gets Heinz body anemia, and
everything's a bell curve.
And everything's a bell curve, and you're done.
That's what people need to realize, is that
exactly.
You might be on the far end of the bell curve with your pet. You have no idea.
Exactly. And for me, because I don't ever want to do anything potentially harmful to my, to my patients or my pet parents, I always err on the side of caution. And I'm like, no, if it has garlic and onion, don't do it, because there is that chance that your pet would be the one that gets, critically sick. Same thing for grapes and raisins. My old dog, God love him, could always find the trail mix. And I never had raisins in my house, but he always found the raisin trail mix when we'd visit my sister. And every single time I would bring him into the hospital to, induce emesis and vomit, to get diuresed. And God love him, he never developed acute kidney injury. And then you get the German Shepherd down the road that ate one raisin and is on dialysis. And you just don't know.
Yeah, no, you're totally right.
Yeah, there's a lot to tackle there. And it's really hard to tackle this grape myth, because she talks about grapes, but then she goes on and talks about raisins, and they're two different things. And I'd like to see this German Shepherd that ate one raisin and is on kidney dialysis. Do they do that for dogs? Dialysis for dogs? I guess they do. Um, I know people, hundreds of people that feed their dogs grapes. I feed my own dogs grapes. I was just reading a book yesterday written by a veterinarian who used to feed nothing but grapes and grape juice to dogs for 30 days. 30 days, nothing but grapes and grape juice to dogs to reverse their diseases. And he always had success. Unfortunately, there just aren't very many vets who are willing to step out of the mold and be pioneers like he was. But this idea about grapes, it's hard to know where it originated. It might have had some organic origin. There's so much that refutes it. The studies that were done on dogs, that where the dogs were surrogates for humans, in the studies they were subjects, they were trying to, glean, the researchers were trying to glean information about how grapes can be beneficial to humans, and the dogs were fed grapes, and the ones that were fed grapes actually were healthier at the end of the study than the ones that were in the control group that were not fed grapes. um, they feed, they include grape products in commercial pet food in Europe and other countries where this grape paranoia doesn't exist. There's just so much against that, the whole idea about grapes being poisonous. And I think where the vet industry benefits is from giving people this notion that they can't trust themselves. They can't possibly know all the things that are out there in nature that can harm your dog. So put your trust in us, and look at our list. Look at our list of hazardous foods. And by the way, there are some foods that are on that hazards list that truly are hazardous to dogs. But grapes, as far as I've been able to discern, are not one of them. And it's avocado pits, for example. I wouldn't want my dog eating an avocado pit. Of all the things that can truly cause harm, grapes is the one that gets talked about. It seems a little bizarre and misdirected to me.
Yeah. Yeah, and the thing is, there's so many dogs that live on grape vineyards that eat grapes for, their
Right.
entire portion of their lives. My dogs all eat
Right.
grapes. They, I've had dogs with cancer with weeks to live, according to the vet. And, they ate grapes and, miraculously got better. Happy had a grapefruit-sized tumor on her spleen that was ready to rupture. And we were told that she has days, maybe a few weeks. She ate watermelon, she ate grapes, she ate, other watery fruits for 90 days. And at the end of 90 days, she no longer had a tumor at all. So,
Right.
the science just doesn't support it's, again, this is,
The
example.
real science.
Yeah,
Right,
the real science. This is an example of, the vet industry not being willing to look at the overall nutrition of the dog, not being willing to look at the damage caused by kibble, and then having a dog presenting with symptoms, and then reverse engineering and saying, oh, well, what did the dog eat? And then the owner says, oh, the dog ate, a single raisin. Oh, well, that must be the cause of this sudden catastrophic, failure in their
Right.
dog's body. But the reality is the dog was, developing symptoms for a long period of time, and then only presents at the vet when the symptom becomes severe enough that the owner is now, feeling like this is a critical emergency that involves, necessary vet care. So then they have this, this dog ate a grape and showed up with this, kidney failure. So now every time we have kidney
It must be
failure,
the
let's
grape.
look back and see, did that person feed their dog a grape? And then, then we develop this idea that grapes then cause kidney disease. And then we scare people into getting these crazy treatments for when their dog eats the grapes. And then it's self-fulfilling prophecy because the treatments themselves can cause kidney failure. So the
Right.
the chemicals
Right.
that they use in order to induce vomiting and to, flood the body with saline, like we know in humans that saline itself can cause kidney failure. So you're giving a dog, emetics to throw up
That's right.
and clear
That's
it,
right.
and then you're giving it fluids, saline. And if you have a dog that's already sensitive kidney-wise, you give them saline, which is a known, something that is known to cause kidney failure. Now you've got a self-fulfilling prophecy because the treatment itself is
Right.
causing what they're blaming on the grapes. So there's so many different factors that you can look at that are just being ignored in order to perpetuate this myth.
Right. And this is done with more than just grapes. The vet will say, well, your dog's presenting with this kidney problem or this whatever. What have you been feeding? And the owner will say, and whatever the owner says, fill in the blank. If it's something that deviates from commercial pet food, that's the culprit.
Yeah.
That's what gets looked at. Whether it's, oh, well, my dog ate a raw bone yesterday. Oh, I gave my dog a piece of raw chicken this morning. Oh, anything that deviates from commercial pet food will be suspect because of the brainwashing that vets receive in their training.
Exactly. So was there anything else from that clip you wanted to cover, or should we move on?
No, I don't think so. I think you can move on. I think she already did say that business about starch is included in kibble because it makes it puff and pop. And then she goes later on to say that nothing is included in kibble that doesn't have a functional, physiological, or medical function. So, adding an ingredient so it can puff up and make a product look a certain way is not a medical function. That's not a physiological function.
Yeah, and the same can be said for the food colorings that they're adding to the foods. If you're saying earlier in the video, she talks about food colorings being added just to benefit the
owner.
the pleasing appearance for the owner, well, then that's not
Right.
something that is there for a medicinal function or a physiological function. So
Right,
she seems
exactly.
to contradict herself quite a
Right,
bit.
that's a marketing function.
Yep.
Exactly, right.
All right, let's so I think we just have a few more minutes left on the video, so let's just close it out.
Okay.
No, they're great. They're amazing. So, like everything else, and people are going to get tired of me saying this, really depends on the individual. If you have a happy, healthy puppy, happy, healthy, normal adult dog, or even a happy, healthy geriatric dog, if there is no medical problem and they are on an appropriate, complete, and balanced diet, you honestly do not need supplements because that diet has everything that they need. Now, when you start throwing in disease processes, so a mildly overweight, happy, healthy adult that has arthritis, absolutely start considering, joint supplements. If you have skin issues, start considering skin supplements that have omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. For the cognitive guys, if you're really trying to focus on that, maybe consider extra antioxidants. The worse the disease, the more tailored we can get. But in general, if you've got a healthy animal, you do not need any additional supplements at all.
Makes sense. And then the final question, then I'll let you go.
Yeah.
What are the best budget dog foods versus the best expensive dog foods?
That's an awesome question. So again, there's three kind of major manufacturers that to me check all of the boxes. That does not mean that there are other diets out there that cannot be good for your pets. I think I brought up, all three of my pets are on Royal Canin. They all are medical lemons and they have very, very specific disease states. Actually, I take that back. I just switched my dog to Hills, the new Derm Defense. I'm really excited about that. Derm Complete.
Now, did Hills pay you to say that?
Absolutely not. They didn't.
Okay.
No. And that's the other thing that people ask me, like,
I laugh because it's so ridiculous to think about a pet.
Oh, no. I get that question a lot from clients, who pays your wages? And I was like, I pay my own and also my hospital. So I tell people I don't take bribes or I take them all equally.
It's a great place to stop.
Yeah. Once again, it's a logical fallacy and a straw man because she is getting paid. She gets paid to speak at continuing education functions. I think she admits that later on, but that is absolutely not the point. That whether or not vets actually sell these products in their offices is not the point because once in a while you'll say, oh, the vet industry, it's all about money, it's all about selling. It's big pet food is the partner of the vet industry. They keep each other in business and whatnot. And people will say, oh no, my vet doesn't take any money at all from a pet food company. My vet doesn't even sell pet food in his office, which is completely irrelevant. The problem is on a larger scale, on a systemic scale, an educational scale. The industry has wormed its way into the curricula of the schools, and the schools are teaching what serves industry, what serves big pet food, which in turn serves the veterinary industry. So they do scratch each other's backs, and there does not have to be direct. I mean, this nutritionist is being paid by pet food companies. there doesn't have to be direct remuneration in order for there to be financial influence over the message that is being given out by the vet.
Yeah, it's almost like hiding in plain sight. It's like if I admit that I'm
have to add.
if I admit that I'm,
Right.
getting some money from them, then I don't have to admit that I'm being, influenced by them. Because I can say, oh, well, I'm getting money over
Right.
here, but it's not directly influencing me because I'm not getting, a direct salary from the company. So that's, definitely just a
Right.
misrepresentation of what really is going on. I mean, she really is getting money from them, and that does, affect the information that she provides to clients and out on these videos and stuff like that. So the other thing that she brought up, which I thought was kind of interesting, was the supplements, whether we should add supplements to these commercial foods. And she is saying that, if there's specific disease cases, that we should then try to supplement in order to undo the cause of disease. But again, this is a false logic. We're looking at what we can throw at the body to suppress the symptoms. We're not looking at how can we remove the cause. We're not looking at why is my dog having arthritis, and then removing the cause of the arthritis. We're saying my dog has arthritis, so I'm going to throw more stuff at it to burden it more in the hopes that it'll fix this, whatever the specific disease issue is. And I mean, results speak for themselves. The medical industry has no cures for any diseases. And the chronic, if a human or a pet gets into a chronic disease, the likelihood of them getting out of that chronic disease is extremely low. But they do, she does recognize the fact that food is the cause. And so she says, if your dog is having this issue, change their food. So clearly there's a recognition that that food is the cause, or is ultimately a large causative factor. And yet, instead of saying food is the cause, let's remove that food and put into a more natural food, a food that is in alignment with nature. They're saying food is the cause. Here, let's add some more chemicals in hopes that we can balance or make this more complete for the specific disease, that this particular dog is exhibiting.
Right. And when they do have some inadvertent success when they switch a dog from one brand of food to another, it could be that one brand has an ingredient in it that's really indigestible, that's really acidic, that's really difficult for the body to handle. And just taking that slight burden away in the form of feeding a different brand of food means, they might have marginal success in some cases doing that. But that's so risky. Why not just remove the entire cause and have a clean slate and allow the body to heal itself? That's the information that empowers people, and that's why we'll never hear that information from the vet industry, because they don't want to empower people. They want to empower themselves and their industry.
Exactly.
So do you want to go ahead and play the last part? I don't remember if I think she just actually in that last clip did say again that her animals are all medical lemons.
Yeah, she did say that again. She said they were on Royal Canin. They were
all
on Royal Canin.
To Hills.
Yeah. And Royal Canin is one of the brands that she's pushing.
And she says she's very excited about this new food called Derm. Sorry, I was talking over you. She says she's excited about this new Royal Canin or Hills food called Derm something or other, which means skin. So it's probably got something to do with skin, which means one of her dogs is probably having skin issues. And so she recently switched the food out, which, like you said, is an admission that that food is at least a component. But, as you and I know, Lauren, it's 100% of the problem. That's those indigestible wastes that are contained in that food are coming through the skin. And that's once you understand that that's the source of it, it's very easy to get rid of it. And it's very easy to solve the problem completely. So anyway, I don't know what's left of the video, because that's the last thing that I had made notes about. So do you want to go ahead and play the rest and see if anything jumps out for us to talk about?
Yeah, let's go ahead and finish it out and then we can give our closing thoughts.
And when I speak, I do get paid to speak for companies, but I do not get paid to endorse their product. I get paid to speak about a disease state for continuing education purposes.
Okay.
So when I recommend a diet to my colleagues, to my patients, it is for that patient because I think it's medically necessary. I would never recommend anything that is not medically necessary. That would be unethical. But that is a good
Yeah.
question. I do get it. So anyway, the brands that I recommend are Purina, Hills, and Royal Canin. All of them have top tier diets. Those would be the most expensive, from the breed stage to the pro plan to the science diet, all the way down, to the Purina dog chow, things like that. The important thing to note about those companies is that the quality control itself doesn't change. The type of ingredients and the expense of the ingredients and potentially the research that went into each individual diet is different, but the quality control measures to reduce the risk of pathogens, other contaminants, and just to make sure that the diet is appropriate, that all remains the same within the company. Now, again, if you are not feeding Purina, Hills, and Royal Canin, that isn't necessarily bad. There's a lot of companies out there that are trying to do it right. They're trying to source sustainably. They're trying to source quality ingredients. They have nutritionists on staff, or at least they routinely consult with boarded nutritionists. They participate in quality control testing. They absolutely exist, but they're a little bit harder to find. So
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, I think that is about all that I am going to cover for right now. I am
Sure.
out of questions to ask you.
I just wanted to say in that last part that this idea of quality control is the domain of processed foods. You can't have quality control with real foods. Like you're going to get, if you go buy peaches, you're going to get a different variety of peach every week. I've been eating nothing but fruits and vegetables for 20 years, and I know that I can go to the store once and get some fabulous peaches. And if I want to stock up on those peaches, I can go back to the store the next day and they can have a completely different shipment there. So when they talk about quality control, they're talking about the same ingredients in the same condition every time. Nabisco can make sure that their cereals and their crackers and their cookies are the same every time. Real food doesn't work that way. That's not the real world. That's once again making up a false standard by which to judge what you want to judge and declaring it to be good because it passes this false standard that you just created. So it's just crazy. It's just gaslighting. So what are your thoughts, Lauren?
I was going to say something very similar, which is that her primary argument throughout this entire video just seems to be this appeal to authority, logical fallacy, where she's saying that because these big three brands pay a lot of money to run a lot of tests and to pay for clinical studies, to say that their particular blend of inappropriate ingredients is better than an apples to apples comparison of another brand's inappropriate ingredients, that therefore those three brands that can pay the most for these studies, that can create these studies that represent their brand in the way that they want to be represented, are therefore the best foods available. And I mean, that argument doesn't hold water. I mean, it's not in alignment with nature. It's not in alignment with what we can observe with our own eyes. It's
Right.
not, it's like saying, McDonald's is better than Burger King. Neither are good. The other thing I have to question is, she was going into she recommends these top three brands because they have a wide range of products that they offer, from inexpensive grocery store brands to expensive prescription brands. But because they're all paid for to be marketed by an industry that is selling these clinical studies and these marketing terms like complete and balanced and natural and all of these terms that actually don't mean anything other than to be marketing terms. That, you know, that
Yes,
therefore
exactly. And all of that formulation diversity is about marketing.
Right.
It's all marketing. It has
And-
nothing to do with dogs.
how do you sit there and say, I can buy a $5 bag of food or I can buy a $25 bag of food, and the, you know, ingredients are completely different, but they're both equally good? Then why are we paying $25 for this brand? Obviously, there's a reason why they're creating the expensive brand versus the cheap brand. So
Right.
which is it? Is it that they're all, you know, the same because they get this, you know, measurement of what ingredients are going into them or what nutrients are available in them after they process all of the cheap ingredients? Or is it marketing?
It's all marketing. So, okay, well, I think we shared just about everything that we wanted to about this video. I'm sure I'm going to watch it again and note lots of things that I could have said, should have said, whatever. Everybody does that. But anyway, I thought it was really important that we tackle this information and and refute it. So many people are listening to this stuff and they think they're crazy for thinking otherwise, for seeing something different when they look out in real life, and it's because the educational system is actually teaching these things, and it's benefiting them. It's very self-serving. So anyway, I hope everyone enjoyed the video, and we'll see you again next time. Thanks so much, Lauren, for helping me out with this. Good job. Thank you.
Thank you, Nora. My pleasure.
All right. See you next time.